Today's sermon is titled Moving Toward a Type 1 Civilization and will be presented by Brad Seek. Brad is a longtime member of the UUCC. He has shared a variety of topics at the pulpit that were of interest to him and hopefully to his listeners. He received a Bachelor of Science degree in zoology, worked in the field of environmental health, and continues to enjoy retirement living in Cambria. Please welcome Brad.
Good morning, my fellow COVID survivors. Thanks for the opportunity to share with you today. I believe that this is the first time that I have stepped foot in the sanctuary in over a year. It's nice to be back. Almost everyone I have been in contact with has been enjoying the spring, happy to be alive, and looking forward to the future. In 1964, Soviet astronomer Nikolai Kardashev proposed a method of measuring a civilization's level of technological advancement based on the amount of energy it is able to use. Oddly enough, he called it the Kardashev scale, and it has 3 categories. Type 1 can access all the energy that falls on its planet. Type 2 can access all of the energy in the solar system, such as a Star Trek scenario. Type 3 can access energy anywhere in the galaxy, such as Star Wars. Now, Type 2 and 3 are still in the realm of fantasy and fiction, but a Type 1 scenario, well, it is on the ground right here and now and could be in full play in 100 years, less than 100 years. Our first installment of a planetary society is a worldwide central nervous system we call the Internet. It is a child with a mild case of autoimmune disease, but it is also a scrapper who learns from the school of hard knocks. It is growing by leaps and bounds and is constantly rewiring itself depending on how the environment changes. This is a game changer that has transformed almost every aspect of our lives. The future has a way of arriving unannounced, writer George Will once said. That's what I felt when I first realized that we have been dipping our toes into a planetary society for over 25 years. I could also resonate with philosopher Yogi Berra, who once said, "The future just ain't what it used to be." This Type 1 technology has been thrown into the lap of a people who don't even rate a 1. We're only a 0.7, but my God, look how far we have come. 7,500 generations of previously living human beings have made an incredible journey through slow, natural evolution to get us where we are today. The average lifespan of our earlier ancestors prior to agriculture was around 25 years old. Typing them as a 0.0 seems to be a bit unfair because even in the beginning, experts think that they, were able to work together for a common good. These early people could have lived much longer in today's world. Today, the quality of life is not bad for most of us, but not for all of us. And it's never good for a world stability to have so many people living in poverty. If I were one of those individuals, I know I would be going to bed hungry on a regular basis. We can do better, but beating ourselves up is a waste of time. I was reading a chart where it compared share of world population living in poverty to the amount of energy use dating from 1820 to 2015. As we increase the burning of dead plants for heating, lighting, and industry, the extreme poverty rate dropped steadily from 80% to 25%. In that time period, our ancestors were making a lot of nice, shiny new tools that were improving everyday life, thanks to the advancement of science and technology. Based on this chart, our ancestors were also trying to do better, and they succeeded. Improving the quality of life for all has just got to be the most important reason for advancing into a Type 1 environment. The Kardashev scale, number 1 scale, should be updated to include all of the other energy opportunities. But if solar arrays could use just 1/10,000th of what falls on the Earth, it would be enough to double our current energy capacity. Even if we were not having a climate crisis and other environmental degradations, could we expect the fossil fuel industry to come up with that much more? Maybe. But we want a civilization that grows in energy and information that doesn't make our planet unbearably hot or deluged with waste. Putting more of a reliance on renewables will not just be a cool thing to do, it will become part of our basic necessities. Today, fossil fuels represent over 80% of the world's energy consumption. The renewable energy industry has a long way to go before it can even reach parity with oil, gas, and coal. But the potential is enormous. Will there be long-term growth in the renewables? Of course. We will either run, walk, stumble, or crawl into the future with a lot more alternatives. One of my favorite renewable stories involves the community of Boise, Idaho, and their love affair with hydrothermal heating. A river of hot water flows 3,000 feet below Boise, and since 1983, the city has been using that water to directly heat homes, businesses, and institutions, all told about 1/3 of the downtown. It is the largest geothermal heating system in the country. Boise didn't need to drill to access the resource. The 177-degree water rises to the surface of a geological fault in the foothills outside of town. The officials love crunching the numbers and expounding on all the money that has been saved since the beginning. It's surprising they didn't start earlier. Anyway, nice for Boise. Things will be more difficult in the rest of the country, but it does bring attention to the geothermal breakthroughs that are generating tremendous excitement. Some of these innovations have been brought to us compliments of the oil fracking industry. They have mapped out geological formations throughout the country. They are capable of drilling for more than 5 miles horizontally and vertically to a depth of 3 miles. At that level, rock and water temperatures can be as high as 350 degrees Fahrenheit. You could definitely turn a few turbines and heat some additional homes with this resource. But to grow as a solution, geothermal must overcome financial and technical barriers. Now, the same kind of story, more or less, is going on with solar, biomass, wind, fusion, and ocean energy dynamics. These are all viable alternatives which will probably leapfrog one another as breakthroughs become available. Together, they have the potential to power the planet for hundreds of years. It's great to have choices. Wouldn't it be nice if we not only end up with more energy, but experience a reversal in greenhouse gas emissions? Perhaps we could even entertain the idea of having more control over our own climate. Paleontologists suggest that repeated climate change forced our ancestors to adapt time and time again. It has shaped our minds and our bodies via slow biological clock that randomly picked out its winners for the future. Today, we still have to live with that same clock, and we call it evolution. But things are beginning to change. The ability to modify our own biology on a molecular level has arrived. Right now, we're only trying to fix broken bodies, and the method is called gene editing. In my limited understanding, say a gene is a paragraph covering a full page. In the proofreading, you eliminate a bad sentence, replace it with a good one, and suddenly the paragraph comes to life. A gene editing organization called CRISPR is doing just that, and it is doing it with real people. They are conducting a long-term trial to treat young individuals with sickle cell disease. A short time after these individuals were born, their fetal oxygen-carrying hemoglobin gave way to an unhealthy adult version that barely kept these children alive. The single gene causing the disease was edited by CRISPR to allow the children to resume making fetal hemoglobin for the rest of their lives. So far, the results are amazing. These people have a really good chance to live a normal life, and humanity may have another tool to help us all. When I was a biology student, our genetics professor talked about the possibility of this happening someday, and now it's a reality. Other trials to repair broken genes of sickle cell and other genetic diseases will continue for a decade or more, but there will come a time when we may want to use gene editing to improve performance or to extend our own life expectancy. Well, by the way, I'd like to thank Randy for the illustrations. They're really good. And he did all this in very short notice. We have just made a baby step towards steering our molecular clocks into a direction and a speed of our choosing. Another human enhancement in the future will be the availability of spare organ parts for our bodies, such as kidneys, hearts, lungs, and brain tissue. Currently, labs can only make small versions of vital organs, which are being used for research and drug development. Scientists believe that this is a sustainable intermediate step until technical problems can be solved to making full-size body organs. Then someday, we may have the wherewithal to fix a broken heart. Sorry, I couldn't resist. On a more recent front, several patients have received tracheal implants that were grown in the lab from stem cells. And the results so far are encouraging. In another case, a lab-grown bone was surgically placed in a patient whose tibia had been mangled in an accident. The raw material for growing the implant came from the patient's own fat cells. His quick recovery far exceeded any other bone grafting method in medicine. And the basis for these successful results originated from stem cell research. For over 20 years, the controversies involved in fetal stem cell research has had a slowing effect on discoveries. Even though the Biden administration has loosened some requirements, the pace will not dramatically change until these specialized or unspecialized cells, can be independently developed in the lab. There is a very important dialogue going on here, and science will always gather knowledge faster than societies can garner acceptance. Moving over to something that is much less controversial, but no less interesting, is a beautifully simplistic material called graphene. Graphene is an excellent conductor of electricity and heat. It is much stronger than steel. It is corrosion resistant, flexible, and incredibly light. It's a sheet of carbon atoms arranged in hexagonal patterns that is only an atom thick. Two British scientists discovered graphene in 2004, and all they did was remove flakes from a lump of graphite with sticky tape. By separating the graphite fragments repeatedly, they managed to create flakes that were only an atom thick. The experiment could have been conducted in a pub or by some bored student sitting at his or her desk. Instead, the discovery was made by our British heroes who were awarded the Nobel Prize. Why didn't I think of that? Graphene is already being used in clothing, sporting equipment, medical transplant, composites, and coatings of all kinds. In 2017, an integrated graphene electronics chip was produced commercially and sold to a research lab. Graphene is seriously being considered as a semiconductor to replace silicon in making computer chips. For the past 50 years, silicon semiconductors have been doubling computer power every 18 months. However, current fabrication methods will not be able to stamp out silicon chips much smaller than they are today. Graphene could pick up where silicon leaves off to make computer chips smaller and our future devices ever more powerful. Is there no end to this wonder product? Apparently not. But manufacturing graphene in its proper form doesn't come easy, at least not yet. There's a very promising technique called flash graphene. Scientists at Rice University were able to take any kind of carbon-based trash, treat it with an electrical pulse to 3,000 degrees Celsius. In less than a second, carbon was the only remaining element, and as it cooled, it reconstructed into you know what. Is it going to be that easy? Recyclers would hope so. Their inventories are bursting at the seams. A simple, low-tech solution should never be overlooked. On an environmental front, it's encouraging to see an increasing interest in the reintroducing of the American beaver throughout the United States. In Cambria's watershed alone, there could be at least a dozen or more appropriate habitats. Beavers appear to be one of those keystone species and ecosystem engineers creating and maintaining much needed aquatic habitat. It's another low-tech solution that benefits fish and wildlife, surface water storage, and groundwater recharge. This would mean more drinking water for our community at a lower cost. Maintaining and enhancing natural environments that supply our basic needs will become essential in the years to come. Audrey Taub of SLO Beaver Brigade will be sharing much more of this topic at the UUCC services on June 27th. One of the nice things about doing research on Google is working with the algorithms. It's like having a card catalog, librarian, and experts all rolled into one. It's like having, I just said that. Okay. Large tech organizations are continuously improving their algorithms to better serve the needs of their users. A way for an algorithm to become intelligent is simply through the school of hard knocks, just like the rest of us. Algorithms are subject to exams that generally involve the input of tests proctored by programmers. Based on the test results, the algorithm can modify its task. As it passes the exams and is able to perform independent tasks involving a little common sense and is able to perform with some pattern recognition, it can become artificially intelligent, or AI for short. Behind every Siri and Alexa, there is a highly educated speech recognition algorithm. This could be the first step towards developing something more sophisticated, such as a universal translator that will capture the meaning and nuance of every language in the world. Now, that little character down below is a babblefish. It is a biological algorithm, a version described by Douglas Adams in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. You simply insert this tiny little creature in your ear, and it will convert any language in the Milky Way into our own native language. Never underestimate the miracle of life. Our COVID vaccine was developed very quickly thanks to an AI robotic-enabled drug discovery system that could work around the clock. It still took some common sense by researchers who recognized that a vaccine was needed before we even knew we should have one. AI is also being tested in the reading of medical scanning charts. In one trial, an algorithm could identify suspicious regions of a sample as cancerous or non-cancerous to an accuracy of 99%. Some of these samples were indistinguishable to the trained human eye. This particular AI is carrying the wisdom of many human-trained eyes that are focused on just one thing. So last week, I was craving a pizza when I heard a knock on the door. When the door opened, I stared in disbelief and said, "How did you know I was craving a pizza?" No, it wasn't AI, it was just a good neighbor. As more devices run on AI-powered technology, more personalization will take place in real time. As information becomes more accurate and available, AI becomes more useful. Humans will be working side by side with AI in the making of music, movies, and games. Someday, those nagging chatbots in customer service will respond more like us as natural language algorithms continue to improve. Some of the more controversial AI applications, such as facial recognition, will continue to be debated. San Francisco was the first major city to ban facial recognition by their agencies because, quite frankly, faces are not all that unique. Surveillance is okay, suppression is not. If there was ever an area where superintelligence could arrive unannounced, it might happen in the Cold War arena of cybersecurity. Large organizations are in continuous arms race with what appears to be government-sponsored hacking. All parties are employing ever more sophisticated programs to gain some strategic advantage over the other. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell stated that cyber attacks represent the single greatest threat to the world financial system. AI is a very hot topic weighing on the minds of many people. Here's what some of them had to say. Development of full artificial intelligence could spell the end of the human race. It would take off on its own and redesign itself at an ever-increasing rate. Stephen Hawking. As more AI is entering into the world, more and more emotional intelligence must enter into leadership. Amit Ray. The real question is, when will we draft an AI Bill of Rights, and what will it consist of? Gray Scott. Nobody phrases it this way, but I think that AI is almost a humanities discipline. It's really an attempt to understand human intelligence and human cognition. Sebastian Thrun. And on a lighter note, Someone on TV only has to say, "Alexa," and she lights up. She's always ready for action. She's the perfect woman. Never says, "Not tonight, dear." Sybil Sage. It's hard to imagine that the human brain, the most complicated living organ on this planet, could be rivaled by a digital intelligence. It seems foreign to me when I hear author Ray Kurzweil predict a singularity by 2040, in which machine intelligence and human intelligence could start to merge. And yet, when I look at people focusing on their handheld devices, iPhones or any other computers could easily be interpreted as brain extenders. We keep them close by because they enlighten us and make us smarter. A teenager would have to watch an old classic movie to imagine what life might have been like before we had our internet devices. And wouldn't it be nice if a chip implant could be effective in treating neurological disorders such as Parkinson's, dementia, MS, mental illness, or strokes? Wouldn't we want this to relieve the suffering? In 1970, a college friend once told me that he wished technology would never progress beyond the point of making beer. Well, the tools for making beer have changed a lot since then, and we know that technology and beer can both have a double-edged sword. Back in the 1950s and 60s, most of us were just kids when humanity was faced with an existential threat. Two superpowers had enough weaponry to destroy the world several times over. As children, we practiced hiding under the desks, covering our heads, and quite frankly, laughing a lot. It all seemed so surreal and absurd. We carried those insights forward in the 70s and 80s, and eventually the situation improved. I think and I hope that whatever threats come to pass, the younger generations will have the insights and the resources to deal with their existential threats. It may be better to face the challenges of dynamism rather than the challenges of stasis, especially if it continues to improve the quality of everyone's life. Now, there's so many other topics that I didn't include, such as nanotechnology, superconductivity, autonomous transportation, cryptocurrency, quantum computing, and space travel. All of these could become tools in a future planetary society. But let's finish up by imagining that it is the year 2100 and we are living longer than ever before. Why? Because we are doing these 5 things to stay at the top of our game. Number 1, we are replacing our organs as they wear out or become diseased with new ones grown in a lab. Number 2, we are ingesting a cocktail of enzymes and proteins that are designed to increase cell repair and to regulate metabolism. Number 3, we are using therapy to alter genes that slow down the aging process. Number 4, we are injecting a community of trained atoms or nanobots to detect and destroy diseases like cancer before they become a problem. And number 5, believe it or not, we are still dieting and exercising. Is there another slide, Randy? Here's to your health.